In this lecture, we're going to understand how to create a function without a function name. We are going to understand what is Lambda function in Python. Is there any way to create a function without their name? Yes, it is. In Python, you can create a function without a function name. And this technique is called a Lambda function, or you can call it an anonymous function. The anonymous function is the function without a name. If you want to create a function and you don't want to specify name to it, you can use the Lambda function. You can call it Lambda or anonymous. Both are identical. To identify how Lambda function work in Python, let's take a look at a very simple example. So in standard Python, if you want to create a function, you will start with the define keyword. You will start with the define keyword, then you will specify name to it. I will say here add 1, and I'm going to specify parentheses and pass parameter here, just like this. And then you specify the body of this function. So here I'm going to return something. Here I'm going to say x plus 1. So I'm going to add 1 inside this x variable. Now if I want to call this function, then I'm going to simply say add 1 and specify value here. So I'm going to say here 2. And if I want to print my result, I can just simply say here print and call this function inside this print statement. When I execute this file, I'm going to have 3 as a result. So I'm going to just add 1 inside this argument using this function. Now let me show you how to do the same thing with Lambda function. So instead of this function, I'm going to simply create a variable here, add 1, and specify Lambda function to it. So to create a Lambda function, or you can say an anonymous function, I'm going to start with the keyword Lambda, just like this. And then I'm going to specify parameter to this function. I'm going to specify only a single parameter. So I'm going to say here x, then specify body to this function. And here I'm going to say x plus 1. So now we can call this anonymous function using this variable. So you just need to call the variable name, and in the parentheses, you need to pass value to this x variable. When I execute this file, I'm going to have 3 as a result. So you can notice I'm going to have the same result using the Lambda function. Now let me show you one more way to call this function. Now you can notice I'm calling this function using this variable. Now what if I don't want to create any variable? Instead, I just want to call this function. I can wrap this function in the parentheses. So I'm going to just grab this statement, get rid of this statement right from here. Right here, I'm going to create parentheses just like this. And inside this parentheses, I'm going to just paste my Lambda function just like this. And as you can notice, and using this parentheses, I'm going to pass value to this x variable. So I'm going to leave this parentheses as it is. When I execute this file, I'm going to have 3 as a result. So you can notice you successfully created the anonymous function in Python. Now let's take a look at one more example. Now what I want to pass 2 parameters to this Lambda function and add both this parameter and return it. To do that, I'm going to simply create here a variable add 2 is equal to, I'm going to start with the Lambda keyword to create anonymous function, and then I'm going to say here x and y. So I'm going to pass 2 parameters to this function, and in the body I'm going to simply say x plus y. So I want to add x and y, so I'm going to say here x and y, just like this. And in this Lambda function, and right here I'm going to just add 2. Now as you know, we have 2 arguments to this function, so I need to pass here 2 arguments. Here I'm going to say 2 and 4. When I execute this file, I'm going to have 6 as a result. So you can notice that's super easy to create a Lambda function in Python. Let me just create this function without this variable. I'm going to grab this statement right from here, put that in the parentheses, just like this. Get rid of this statement and execute the file. I'm going to have the same result. Now Lambda function work amazingly with filter and map functions as well. So let me show you a very simple example how the anonymous function work with filter and map function. So I'm going to just create a simple example here. So I'm going to first create a list, and I'm going to name this list my list, just like this. And inside this list, I'm going to have some numbers. Now what I want to just filter these numbers and only get the even numbers from this list. How can I do that? To do that, I'm going to just simply use a filter function. So here I'm going to simply create a variable, new list, and then I'm going to just call here list, and inside this list, I'm going to call a filter function. The filter function in Python takes function and a list as argument. The filter function takes the function and a list as arguments. The function is called with all the items in the list and a new list is returned for which the function evaluates to true. For example, in the filter, I'm going to just simply first specify a function as a first argument. So as I said earlier, filter takes the function as a first argument. So instead of creating a new function, I'm going to call here a lambda function. So here I'm going to say lambda and specify parameter x and specify body here. And inside this body, I'm going to just simply specify x modulus by 2 is equal to 0. If this condition return true, I want to just return my list. So I'm going to specify here comma and specify my list. Now what I'm going to do is, using this lambda function, I'm going to get each element from this list and pass it to this function. This function is going to get these list items one by one and check for this condition. If the value of this list modulus by 2 equal to 0 return true, then this filter is going to return that element. Let me show you the result first. Here I'm going to say print new list. When I execute this file, I'm going to have the even numbers. So when this function return true, I'm going to have my list item return from this filter function. And as you know, we wrap this filter function inside this list. So I'm going to have list as a result. Now let me show you one more example. Let me get it off this list right from here. And now what I want to just multiply these list items one by one by 2. So I'm going to use here map function for that. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to just see here list. I'm using this list function because I want to get the result in list format. So I'm going to use here list. Inside this list, I'm going to say map, and to this parenthesis, I'm going to pass argument to this map function. The map function first take function as a first argument and then take list as a second argument. So here as a first argument, I'm going to pass a function. So here I'm going to say lambda x, then specify body of this function, and as I said, I want to multiply this list item by 2. So here just out of this x, I'm going to say x multiply by 2, just like this. And then just out of this 2, I'm going to specify comma and then specify my list, just like this. As you can notice, this is my first argument to this map function and this is my second argument. As I said earlier, map function takes the function as a first argument and list as a second argument. Once I specify that, let me just execute this file. When I execute this file, you can notice the map function allows us to multiply this value by 2. Now let me first explain this function. I'm going to use this list to get the result in the list format. Then I'm going to put the map function inside it. The map function takes the function as a first argument. This function is going to work on each of these list elements. Just out of that, I'm going to specify my list as a second argument. When I execute this file, this map function is going to iterate over all these items and multiply it by 2 and then return the result and then return the result, and then I'm going to have the result something like this. So as you can notice, using lambda function, this is super easy to create inline functions. So I hope you understand how to create a lambda function in Python. Practice with this code to understand how this works. That is all for now. I will see you in the next one.